The blood-red sun sank toward the horizon as Olivia Matthews sprinted across the open plain, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. The hem of her torn dress catching on sagebrush as she fled the man who had stolen 3 years of her life with sweet lies that turned to bitter cruelty. Wyoming Territory, 1875. The untamed landscape stretched before her like a terrible promise: freedom if she could survive it, death if she couldn't. Olivia's lungs burned as she pushed herself forward, desperate to put as much distance as possible between herself and the Blackwater mine, where Gerald Davis waited, likely already discovering her absence from the small cabin he'd imprisoned her in since bringing her west from Boston with promises of marriage and prosperity. Worthless, his voice haunted her thoughts as she ran. You're worthless, Olivia. No one else would have you. No one else would tolerate your failings. The first time he'd struck her, she'd believed it was an aberration. By the 100th time, she'd accepted it as her due. Until today, when she'd found the letter evidence that Gerald planned to abandon her for a wealthy widow from Denver. Something inside her had finally snapped, like a rope pulled too tight for too long. Olivia stumbled, catching herself against a boulder as she paused to catch her breath. Her right eye was swollen nearly shut from Gerald's farewell gift that morning. Her lip was split, and she could taste the metallic tang of blood. The bruises beneath her dress were countless, but for the first time in 3 years she felt something other than fear and resignation. She felt rage. And now she was running, following the rough trail toward the town of Promise Creek, a place she'd only heard mentioned by the miners who occasionally visited Gerald. 20 miles, they'd said, 20 miles to civilization, to help. If she could make it before Gerald realized she was gone and came after her. The ground began to slope upward, and Olivia's strength was failing. The meager provisions she'd managed to grab, a canteen of water and a small bundle of stale bread, wouldn't sustain her for long. As darkness descended, the temperature dropped and she shivered in her thin dress. She needed shelter, but the sparse landscape offered little protection. A howl echoed across the plain, sending chills down her spine. Wolves. She needed to keep moving, one foot in front of the other. That's what her mother had taught her when times were hard back in Boston, before the consumption took her. One foot in front of the other. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Olivia crested a small rise and saw the flicker of a campfire in the distance. For a moment, hope surged through her, then just as quickly died. It could be anyone down there. Another miner. A drifter. Someone worse than Gerald if such a person existed, but the alternative was freezing in the night or becoming prey to whatever roamed these wilds. Gathering what remained of her courage, Olivia moved toward the light. As she drew closer, she could make out the silhouette of a man sitting by the fire, his back to her. A horse was tethered nearby, along with what appeared to be several cattle. A cowboy, then, possibly a cattle drive. She hesitated at the edge of the firelight, suddenly aware of how she must look battered, filthy, desperate. "You can step into the light, madam," a deep voice called out, startling her. "I don't bite, and neither does my coffee, though some might argue that point." Olivia froze, her instinct to flee warring with her need for help. The man hadn't even turned around. How had he known she was there? "I heard you coming from a fair distance," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "Not many folks out this way, and those that are don't usually stumble around in the dark." Slowly, he turned to face her, and Olivia caught her breath. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun. His eyes, illuminated by the firelight, were a startling blue against his tanned skin. A week's worth of stubble covered his jaw, and his dark hair curled from beneath a well-worn hat. When he saw her face, his expression changed instantly from mild curiosity to concern. "Good Lord, madam," he said, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. "What happened to you?" Olivia tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The adrenaline that had propelled her this far suddenly drained away, leaving her trembling and weak. The world tilted alarmingly, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the cowboy lunging forward to catch her as she fell. She awoke to the smell of coffee and the crackling of the fire. Something warm was draped over her, a blanket, she realized, rough but clean. She was lying on a bedroll near the fire, and for a disorienting moment, she thought she was back at the mine, that her escape had been merely a dream. But the pain in her body was real, and when she opened her eyes, she saw not the rough-hewn walls of Gerald's cabin but the vast canopy of stars overhead. The cowboy sat across the fire, watching her with those piercing blue eyes. "Welcome back," he said quietly. "You gave me quite a scare." Olivia struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain that shot through her ribs. "Easy now," the cowboy cautioned. "Those ribs of yours need some time. How long was I?" Olivia's voice was raspy from disuse and thirst. "About an hour," he replied, reaching for a canteen. "Here, drink this slowly." He moved to her side, helping her hold the canteen to her lips. The water was cool and sweet, and Olivia had to restrain herself from gulping it down. "My name's Wade," he said when she'd finished drinking. "Wade Callahan. I'm moving cattle to Promise Creek for the Rocking R Ranch." "Olivia Matthews," she replied, her voice stronger now. I'm trying to get to Promise Creek as well." Wade nodded, his expression carefully neutral as he studied her injuries. "Whoever did this to you," he said finally, "I'm guessing they'll be looking for you." It wasn't a question, but Olivia nodded anyway. "How far behind?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I left this morning while he was at the mine. He might not have discovered I'm gone yet, or he could be right behind me." Wade considered this, then moved back to his side of the fire where he added more wood to the flames. "Well, Miss Matthews, you're in luck. I'm headed to Promise Creek myself, and I don't much care for men who beat women. You're welcome to ride with me if you're willing." Relief flooded through Olivia, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't have any money to pay you, but once I reach town, I'll find work," and Wade waved away her words. "I'm not asking for payment. My ma raised me better than that." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Hungry? It's just jerky and hardtack, but it'll keep you going." Olivia accepted the food gratefully, suddenly aware of the hollow ache in her stomach. As she ate, Wade busied himself with various camp tasks, giving her space while staying within sight. She noticed he moved with an easy grace, efficient in his actions, a man comfortable in his own skin and in this harsh landscape. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. In her experience, men rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. Wade paused in his work, looking at her thoughtfully. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, "and because whoever marked up your face like that deserves a reckoning." There was steel in his voice that sent a shiver down Olivia's spine, not of fear, but of something else she couldn't quite name. "We'll leave at first light," Wade continued, seemingly unaware of the effect his words had on her. "Promise Creek is about 15 miles from here. We should make it by midday tomorrow. You should rest now. I'll keep watch." Despite her exhaustion, Olivia found it difficult to sleep. The ground was hard beneath the bedroll, and her injuries throbbed with every heartbeat. But more than that, she was afraid to close her eyes, afraid that when she opened them again, she would find herself back in Gerald's cabin, this brief taste of freedom nothing but a cruel dream. "I'm real," Wade's voice came softly from across the fire, as if he'd read her thoughts again. "And so is this fire and that blanket and tomorrow's ride to Promise Creek. Sleep, Miss Matthews, you're safe tonight." Somehow, against all reason and experience, Olivia believed him. As she drifted into an exhausted slumber, her last conscious thought was that she had never before felt safe in a man's presence, not even before Gerald had revealed his true nature. The dawn came too soon, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her body stiff and aching but her mind clearer than it had been in months. Wade was already up, tending to a small fire and preparing a simple breakfast. His cattle, a small herd of about 20 head, grazed nearby under the watchful eye of a well-trained cattle dog that periodically circled the group, keeping them together. "Morning," Wade said, handing her a tin cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you," Olivia replied, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. The simple kindness of it a hot breakfast, coffee prepared for her, made her throat tight with emotion. As they ate, Wade outlined his plan. We'll ride double on Samson, he said, nodding toward his horse, a sturdy bay gelding. He's strong enough to carry us both. The cattle will slow us down some, but we should still make Promise Creek by early afternoon. Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety at the thought of riding pressed against this stranger. It wasn't that she feared Wade would harm her, something in her trusted him, despite her better judgment, but the very idea of such proximity to any man made her palms sweat. Wade must have seen something in her expression, for his voice gentled. I know it's not ideal, Miss Matthews, but it's the safest way. I give you my word as a gentleman that you've nothing to fear from me. It's not that, Olivia said quickly, embarrassed. I'm just not used to kindness anymore. A flash of anger crossed Wade's face, quickly controlled. Well, that's a shame and a sin, he said, his voice steady, but one that can be remedied starting today. They broke camp efficiently, Wade doing most of the work while insisting Olivia rest her injuries. When it came time to mount up, he was as good as his word, helping her onto Samson with careful hands that never lingered, then swinging up behind her with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. Ready? He asked, his voice close to her ear. Olivia nodded, too tense to speak. Wade clicked his tongue and Samson moved forward, the cattle falling into line behind them, guided by the dog's expert herding. The first hour was torture for Olivia, every muscle in her body rigid with tension. But gradually, as the miles passed and Wade made no move beyond what was necessary to guide the horse, she began to relax. The rhythm of Samson's gait was almost hypnotic, and the warmth of Wade at her back was oddly comforting against the morning chill. You're not from around here, Wade observed after they'd ridden in silence for some time. Your accent says East Coast, Boston, Olivia confirmed. I came west 3 years ago with. She hesitated, Gerald's name sticking in her throat. With the man who hurt you, Wade finished for her. Yes, he promised me marriage and a good life. My parents had died and I had no family left, no prospects. He seemed like salvation at the time. But he wasn't. No, Olivia agreed softly. He wasn't. Wade was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had a careful neutrality. This man, he's at Blackwater Mine. Olivia stiffened. How did you know that? It's the only working mine within a day's walk of where I found you, Wade explained. And you said you'd been walking since morning. His name is Gerald Davis, Olivia said, the name bitter on her tongue. He's the foreman there. Wade's body tensed slightly behind her. Davis, tall fellow, red beard, scar along his jaw. A chill ran through Olivia. You know him, know of him, Wade corrected. He's got a reputation in these parts, none of it good. The implication that Gerald's cruelty might extend beyond her, that there might be other women who had suffered at his hands, made Olivia's stomach clench. It shouldn't have surprised her, but somehow it did. What will you do in Promise Creek? Wade asked, changing the subject. Olivia realized she hadn't thought that far ahead. Her escape had been impulsive, driven by fear and a sudden, desperate need for freedom. Find work, I suppose, she said. I can sew, cook, clean. I taught school briefly in Boston before Gerald. The town's growing, Wade said. They just built a new schoolhouse last year. Might be they need a teacher. Hope flickered in Olivia's chest, quickly doused by reality. I have no references, no credentials to show, and look at me. She gestured to her battered face. Who would hire me looking like this? Those marks will fade, Wade said firmly. And Promise Creek isn't Boston. Out here, people judge you more on what you can do than where you came from or what papers you carry. Olivia wanted to believe him, but years with Gerald had taught her to expect the worst. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape gradually changing from open plain to more varied terrain with copses of trees and rolling hills. Around midday, Wade called a halt by a small stream to rest the horse and let the cattle drink. He helped Olivia dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist, lifting her down as if she weighed nothing at all. We should reach Promise Creek in another couple of hours, he said, handing her the canteen. How are you holding up? Better than I expected, Olivia admitted. Her body ached from the unaccustomed riding, but it was a clean pain, honest, unlike the injuries Gerald had inflicted. Wade busied himself checking Samson's tack while Olivia washed her face in the cool stream water. She caught a glimpse of her reflection and winced. Her right eye was swollen and discolored, her lips split and puffy. No wonder Wade had been so concerned when he first saw her. "He'll come after me," she said suddenly, the realization hitting her with fresh force. "When Gerald realizes I'm gone, he'll come to Promise Creek. It's the nearest town." Wade straightened, his expression grave. "Likely he will," he agreed, "but Promise Creek has a sheriff, a good one. Law means something there." "Gerald doesn't care about law," Olivia said, her voice rising with panic. "He'll say I'm his wife or that I stole from him. He'll make them believe him." Wade crossed to her, crouching down so they were at eye level. "Olivia," he said, and it was the first time he'd used her given name. "I won't let him take you back, I promise you that." There was such conviction in his voice, such unwavering certainty, that Olivia found herself believing him despite years of learned distrust. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" Wade's blue eyes held her steadily. "Because no one deserves what was done to you, because my father taught me that a man protects those who need protecting. And because from the moment I saw you standing at the edge of my camp, something told me you were worth fighting for." Olivia couldn't speak, her throat too tight with emotion. Wade seemed to understand, rising to his feet and offering her his hand. "Come on," he said gently. "We should keep moving." They remounted and continued their journey, but something had shifted between them. Olivia found herself leaning back slightly into Wade's solid presence, drawing strength from his quiet confidence. The landscape grew more populated as they approached Promise Creek. Fenced pastures appeared, then scattered homesteads, and finally they crested a rise and saw the town itself spread out below them. It was larger than Olivia had expected, several streets of wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, smoke curling from chimneys. Compared to Boston, it was tiny, of course, but after 3 years of isolation at the mine, it looked like a metropolis. "Welcome to Promise Creek," Wade said, a smile in his voice. "Not much compared to Boston, I expect, but it's a good place. Good people, mostly." As they approached the town, Olivia became acutely aware of her appearance, her torn, dirty dress, her bruised face. People would stare, would whisper. She stiffened again, dreading the scrutiny. "Head up," Wade murmured behind her. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of. The shame belongs to the man who did this, not to you." They rode down the main street, and as Olivia had feared, people stopped to stare. But their expressions weren't condemning or mockingly curious as she'd expected. Instead, she saw concern, and in some of the women's faces, a flash of recognition and sympathy that suggested they understood all too well what she had endured. Wade guided them to a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Promise Creek Hotel and Dining Room. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Olivia down. Her legs nearly buckled when she hit the ground, stiff from the long ride. "Steady now," Wade said, his hand at her elbow until she found her balance. "Wait here a moment." He tied Samson to the hitching post and had a brief word with his cattle dog, who immediately sat beside the horse, alert and watchful. Then Wade guided Olivia up the steps and into the hotel. The interior was simple but clean, with a small lobby and a reception desk where a middle-aged woman with graying hair pinned in a neat bun looked up at their entrance. Her eyes widened at the sight of Olivia's face, then narrowed as she looked between them. "Wade Callahan," she said, her tone suspicious. "What's going on here, Mrs. Winters?" Wade greeted her, tipping his hat. "This is Miss Olivia Matthews. She needs a room and some privacy. She's had a difficult journey." The woman's expression softened as she looked more closely at Olivia. "I can see that," she said. "Gerald Davis's work, if I'm not mistaken." Olivia started in surprise. "You know him?" "Know of him," Mrs. Winters corrected, unconsciously echoing Wade's earlier words. "He comes to town sometimes, always seemed too smooth by half to me." She reached beneath the counter and produced a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs. It's small but clean, and it has a lock on the door." Wade reached for his wallet, but Mrs. Winters waved him off. "Not from you, Wade. Miss Matthews can settle up when she's on her feet again." She looked directly at Olivia. We take care of our own in Promise Creek, honey, always have. Olivia blinked back tears at the unexpected kindness. Thank you, she managed. I'll send up some hot water and clean towels, Mrs. Winters continued. And I'll have Mary bring you a tray from the kitchen. You look like you could use a decent meal. Wade guided Olivia up the narrow staircase to her room. It was indeed small, with just a bed, a washstand, a small table, and a chair, but to Olivia it looked like a palace. A real bed with clean sheets, a door that locked from the inside, windows that overlooked the busy street below. I need to see to my cattle, Wade said, standing awkwardly by the door, but I'll come back to check on you once they're settled at the livery. You've done more than enough, Olivia said. I don't know how to thank you, Wade shook his head. No thanks needed, just get some rest. He hesitated, then added, I'll speak to Sheriff Holden about Davis, make sure he knows the situation. After Wade left, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the past 24 hours. She had done it, escaped Gerald, reached Promise Creek. But what now? She had no money, no possessions beyond the clothes on her back. Gerald would come looking for her, and while Wade seemed determined to protect her, he was just one man. And a stranger, really, despite the strange connection she felt to him. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. It was a young maid with hot water, towels, and a bundle of clothing. Mrs. Winters sent these up, the girl said. Said they might fit you. They belonged to her daughter before she got married and moved to Denver. Please thank her for me, Olivia said, touched by the woman's thoughtfulness. Once alone again, Olivia stripped off her filthy dress and washed as best she could with the basin of hot water. The simple act of being clean again brought tears to her eyes. Gerald had always controlled everything, including when she could bathe, using cleanliness as yet another way to reward or punish her. The clothes Mrs. Winters had sent, a simple blue dress, undergarments, and a shawl, were slightly too large but clean and well made. Olivia had just finished dressing when another knock came at the door, this time a different maid with a tray of food, a bowl of hearty stew, fresh bread, and a pot of tea. Olivia ate slowly, savoring each bite. The stew was rich with vegetables and tender beef, the bread still warm from the oven. It was the best meal she'd had in years, and by the time she finished, exhaustion was overtaking her. She barely managed to set the tray outside her door before collapsing onto the bed, locking the door, and falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke disoriented, the room dark except for the faint glow of moonlight through the window. For a terrifying moment, she thought she was back in Gerald's cabin, but then she felt the softness of the hotel bed beneath her and remembered she was in Promise Creek. She was free. A soft knock at the door made her heart race. How long had she slept? Was it morning already? Who is it? She called, her voice shaky. Wade, came the reply. I'm sorry to disturb you, but I needed to make sure you were all right. Olivia fumbled for the lamp on the bedside table, lighting it with trembling fingers before crossing to unlock the door. Wade stood in the hallway, hat in hand, looking tired but alert. I'm sorry, he said again. I came by earlier, but Mrs. Winters said you were sleeping, and I didn't want to wake you. What time is it? Just past 8 in the evening, Wade replied. You slept the afternoon away, but from the looks of you this morning, you needed it. Olivia stepped back, silently inviting him in. It wasn't proper, having a man in her room, but then nothing about her situation was proper. And somehow, with Wade, propriety seemed less important than the comfort of his presence. Wade entered but remained standing near the door, maintaining a respectful distance. I spoke with Sheriff Holden, he said. Told him about Davis and what he did to you. He's a good man, Olivia. He'll help. What did he say? Olivia asked, perching on the edge of the bed. That Davis has no legal claim on you if you're not married, which I'm guessing you're not. Olivia shook her head. He promised marriage, but it never happened. He said it wasn't necessary out here, that everyone would consider me his wife anyway. A convenient lie, Wade said, his voice hardening. The sheriff said if Davis comes to town looking for you, he'll intercept him, but... He hesitated. But what? But he can't arrest him just for what he did to you, not without evidence and not if it happened outside town limits. He can keep him away from you, warn him off, but that's about all. Olivia nodded, unsurprised. She had never expected justice, only escape. There's something else, Wade continued, shifting his weight uncomfortably. I spoke with the school board. They're in need of a teacher, their last one left suddenly to care for an ailing parent back east. They're willing to meet with you tomorrow if you're feeling up to it. Hope and anxiety warred in Olivia's chest. You did that for me, but they haven't even seen me, don't know anything about me. I vouched for you, Wade said simply. My word carries some weight here. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Wade looked at her steadily. I know enough. I know you survived years with a monster and still had the courage to run. I know you're educated and articulate, and I know this town needs a teacher who will care about the children, not just the paycheck. And if they hire me, what then? Where will I live? Gerald will still come looking for me. If they hire you, the teaching position comes with a small house behind the schoolhouse. As for Davis, Wade's expression hardened. Let me worry about Davis. I can't let you put yourself in danger for me, Olivia protested. You're not letting me do anything, Wade replied with a slight smile. I'm a grown man making my own choices. His expression sobered. Besides, men like Davis only understand one thing, that there are consequences to hurting people. Olivia studied him in the lamplight, this man who had shown her more kindness in one day than Gerald had in 3 years. He was handsome. She realized with a start, not in the polished, drawing-room way that Gerald had been, but in a rugged, honest way that suited this harsh, beautiful country. Why are you really helping me, Wade? She asked softly. And please don't say it's just the right thing to do. There's more to it than that. Wade was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. My sister, he said finally. She married a man like Davis. Charming on the outside, cruel behind closed doors. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. She died of a fall down the stairs, or so her husband claimed. His voice was steady, but Olivia could hear the pain beneath the words. No one could prove otherwise, though we all knew. He left town before my brothers and I could. Well, it doesn't matter now. I'm so sorry, Olivia whispered, understanding now the depth of his commitment to helping her. Wade nodded his acknowledgement. Get some more rest, he said. The school board will meet you at 10 tomorrow at the schoolhouse. I'll come by to take you there if that's all right. Thank you, Olivia said, the words inadequate for all he had done. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me. You would have survived, Wade said with certainty. You're stronger than you know, Olivia Matthews. He put his hat back on and tipped the brim to her. Sleep well, I'll see you in the morning. After Wade left, Olivia returned to bed, but sleep was elusive now. Her mind raced with possibilities. A teaching position, a house of her own. Could she really build a new life here in Promise Creek? And what of Gerald? She had no illusions that he would simply let her go. He had always been possessive, not out of love, but out of a twisted sense of ownership. And then there was Wade. She barely knew him, yet she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. It wasn't just gratitude for his help, though that was certainly part of it. There was something about his quiet strength, his integrity, that called to something deep within her, something she had thought Gerald had destroyed long ago. But she was damaged, she reminded herself. Broken by years of abuse. What could she possibly offer someone like Wade Callahan? And how could she ever trust a man again after what Gerald had done to her? With these troubled thoughts chasing through her mind, Olivia eventually drifted back to sleep, only to be awakened by nightmares of Gerald finding her, dragging her back to the isolated cabin by the mine. She woke with a gasp, her heart pounding, relieved to find herself still in the safety of the hotel room, with morning light streaming through the window. A fresh knock at the door revealed Mrs. Winters with another tray, this time holding breakfast and a small pot of salve. For those bruises, the older woman explained, gesturing to Olivia's face. It won't heal them overnight, but it'll help with the pain and swelling. She set the tray down and gave Olivia an appraising look. Wade tells me you're meeting with the school board this morning. Yes, Olivia confirmed, surprised by how quickly news traveled. Though I'm not sure what they'll think of me looking like this, Mrs. Winters snorted. They'll think you're a woman who survived something terrible and is still standing. That counts for a lot out here. She adjusted her apron. Now eat your breakfast and put on that salve. Wade will be by at 9:30 to take you to the schoolhouse. The morning passed in a blur for Olivia. She ate, dressed, and applied the salve as instructed, then spent some time attempting to make herself look as presentable as possible. The bruises were still evident, but the swelling had gone down considerably, and the clean dress from Mrs. Winters gave her a respectability she hadn't felt in years. Wade arrived promptly, looking freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt beneath his usual vest and duster. He escorted her through the town, pointing out various establishments as they walked: the general store, the telegraph office, the small church where services were held every Sunday. Promise Creek was a busy place, with wagons and riders moving up and down the main street and people going about their business. Several nodded to Wade, eyeing Olivia curiously but not unkindly. The schoolhouse stood at the end of a side street, a simple white painted building with a bell tower. Behind it was a smaller structure that Olivia assumed was the teacher's residence Wade had mentioned. Several men in suits stood outside the schoolhouse, engaged in conversation. "The school board," Wade murmured as they approached. "Don't be nervous. They need a teacher more than you need this job." But Olivia was nervous, her palms damp and her heart racing. This was her chance at a real fresh start at independence. If she failed here, what alternatives did she have? The meeting went better than she could have hoped. The board members, the town mayor, the minister, and two prominent businessmen were initially taken aback by her appearance. But Wade briefly explained her situation without going into uncomfortable details. The men's expressions shifted from surprise to sympathy, and they conducted the interview with respect and consideration. Olivia spoke of her education in Boston, her brief teaching experience there, and her philosophy on education. She answered their questions thoughtfully and with growing confidence. By the end of the hour, the mayor was offering her the position to begin in 2 days' time with the start of the new school term. "The house needs a bit of work," he explained, handing her the key, "but it's sound and private. The position pays $30 a month, with extra for evening classes for adults, should you choose to offer them." It was less than she would have earned in Boston, but more than enough to support herself modestly in Promise Creek. More importantly, it was her own money, earned by her own efforts, something Gerald had never allowed. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I'll do my best for the children of Promise Creek." After the board members left, Wade showed her around the schoolhouse, a single large room with rows of desks facing a teacher's desk on a small platform, a blackboard covering one wall, and shelves of books along another. It was simple but functional, with large windows letting in plenty of light. "What do you think?" he asked as Olivia ran her fingers along the teacher's desk, already imagining herself standing before a class. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. Then a thought struck her and she turned to Wade with concern. "But what about Gerald? If I'm teaching here, everyone will know where to find me." "That's partly the point," Wade said. "You'll be in the open, surrounded by people who can help protect you. Isolation is what gave Davis his power over you." It made sense, though the idea of being so visible still made Olivia nervous. They moved on to inspect the small house behind the schoolhouse. It was indeed in need of work, dusty from disuse, with a few broken window panes and missing shingles, but it had 2 rooms, a small kitchen area with a wood stove, and most importantly, locks on all the doors and windows. "I can help you fix it up," Wade offered as they stood in what would be the main living area. "The roof needs patching before the next rain, and those windows should be replaced." "You've already done so much," Olivia protested. "I can't keep imposing on you." "It's not an imposition," Wade said, his voice gentle. "I'd like to help if you'll let me." Looking into his earnest blue eyes, Olivia found she couldn't refuse. "Thank you," she said. "I would appreciate the help." They spent the remainder of the day making the small house habitable. Wade repaired the roof and windows while Olivia cleaned away months of dust and cobwebs. Mrs. Winters sent over basic supplies: bedding, cooking utensils, some food staples, and by evening, the place was beginning to look like a home. Wade built a fire in the small stove, taking the chill out of the air as dusk fell. "It's not much," he said, surveying their work, "but it's yours. No one can take it from you or control when you come and go." Olivia looked around the simple space, her space, and felt a swell of emotion. "It's more than I've had in years," she said. "It's freedom." Wade's expression softened. "Yes, it is." He hesitated, then added, "I should go. You need your rest, and I've got to check on my cattle at the livery." "Will you?" Olivia began, then faltered, unsure how to ask what she wanted to ask. "Will I what?" Wade prompted gently. "Will you come back tomorrow?" The words rushed out before she could reconsider them. "To help me prepare for the first day of classes, I mean." A slow smile spread across Wade's face, transforming his features. "I'd like that very much," he said. "And Olivia." He added as he reached for his hat, "You're going to be a fine teacher." The next day was a flurry of activity as Olivia prepared for her first classes. Wade arrived early, bringing breakfast from the hotel dining room and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A welcoming gift," he explained, handing it to her. Inside, Olivia found a beautiful leather-bound journal and a pen set. "For lesson plans or whatever else you might want to write," Wade said, looking almost shy. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you." Together, they organized the schoolhouse, arranging desks, checking supplies, and preparing lessons for different age groups. Wade proved knowledgeable about the local families, helping Olivia understand which children might need extra attention or have special circumstances. "The Jensen twins are bright but restless," he explained as they worked. "Their father died in a mining accident last year, and their mother is struggling to keep their farm going. And young Jimmy Blackwood has a sharp mind but a stutter that makes him reluctant to speak in front of others." "How do you know so much about the children?" Olivia asked, curious about this cowboy who seemed to know everyone in town. Wade shrugged. "I've been working for the Rocking R for 5 years now, made it a point to know the community. Out here, neighbors rely on each other." By the end of the day, the schoolhouse was ready, and Olivia felt as prepared as she could be for her first day of teaching. Wade insisted on walking her back to her little house, where they shared a simple supper of stew that Mrs. Winters had sent over. Nervous about tomorrow? Wade asked as they sat at the small table, the lantern casting warm light between them. "A little," Olivia admitted. "But excited too. It feels like I'm starting to build something real." Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You are something that's yours alone." They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing easily between them. Wade told her about growing up on a small ranch in Colorado, about his dreams of someday having a place of his own. Olivia shared stories of Boston, of her parents, of the life she'd had before Gerald had swept in with his false promises. It was the most comfortable Olivia had felt with anyone in years, and when Wade finally rose to leave, she was reluctant to see him go. "I'll come by after school tomorrow," he promised. "See how your first day went." True to his word, Wade appeared at the schoolhouse the following afternoon, just as Olivia was dismissing her students. The day had been challenging but rewarding. 27 children ranging in age from 6 to 16, all at different levels of education, some eager to learn, others less so. But Olivia had found her teacher's voice again, firm but kind, and by day's end had begun to connect with each child. Wade waited patiently as she bid goodbye to the last students, then entered the schoolhouse with a smile. "How was it?" he asked. "Exhausting," Olivia admitted. "Wonderful, terrifying, all of those things." Wade laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Sounds about right for a first day." "The kids behaved themselves, mostly. I think they were sizing me up, seeing what they could get away with. Tomorrow will be the real test." They fell into a pattern over the next week. Olivia would teach during the day, and Wade would come by afterward, sometimes helping with repairs to the house, other times simply keeping her company. They would talk for hours, sharing stories and opinions, laughing together at the day's small adventures. Olivia found herself looking forward to these evenings more than anything else. On Sunday, Wade escorted her to church, where she was formally introduced to the congregation. Many of the parents of her students came up to thank her for taking on the teaching position, and several of the town's women invited her to join their quilting circle or other social activities. Olivia was overwhelmed by the welcome, unused to such open acceptance after years of isolation. See, Wade said as they walked back to her house after the service. I told you Promise Creek was a good place. You did, Olivia agreed. I just didn't expect everyone to be so kind. Not everyone out here is like Davis, Wade said quietly. Most folks are just trying to make a decent life, same as anywhere else. They reached her house and Olivia hesitated at the door. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked, the invitation becoming familiar between them. Wade nodded, following her inside. But today there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. What is it? Olivia asked as she put the coffee pot on the stove. Something's bothering you, Wade sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. I've been putting off telling you, he said. But I have to head back to the Rocking R tomorrow. The cattle I delivered were just the first part of a larger herd we're moving to market. The boss needs every hand for the drive. Olivia felt a cold knot form in her stomach. How long will you be gone? 3 weeks, maybe a month, Wade replied, watching her carefully. I don't like leaving you, especially with Davis still out there somewhere, but Sheriff Holden knows the situation, and Mrs. Winters has promised to keep an eye on you. Olivia nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. In just over a week, Wade had become central to her new life in Promise Creek, her first real friend, and perhaps something more, though neither of them had put words to the growing feeling between them. I understand, she said, busying herself with the coffee to avoid meeting his eyes. You have responsibilities, I'll be fine. Wade crossed the small room to stand beside her. Olivia, he said softly, look at me. She turned reluctantly, finding his blue eyes intense with an emotion she couldn't quite name. I will come back, he said firmly. That's a promise. And I don't make promises lightly. I know, Olivia said, and she did know. In the short time she had known him, Wade Callahan had proven himself to be a man of his word in every way. While I'm gone, Wade continued, be careful. Don't go anywhere alone after dark. Keep your doors locked. If Davis shows up, go straight to the sheriff or to Mrs. Winters. I will, Olivia promised. I've spent too long fighting for this freedom to lose it now. Wade nodded, satisfied with her answer. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, their conversation deliberately light, avoiding the subject of his imminent departure. But when the time came for him to leave, a heaviness settled between them. At the door, Wade paused, looking down at Olivia with an expression she couldn't quite read. I've been wanting to do something, he said, his voice low, but I wasn't sure if it would be welcome, given what you've been through. Olivia's heart beat faster. What is it? Instead of answering, Wade slowly, carefully, reached out to cup her cheek with his hand. His touch was gentle, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Olivia didn't want to move. May I kiss you goodbye, Olivia Matthews? Wade asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, fear flickered through Olivia, not of Wade, but of the intimacy he was offering, of the vulnerability it represented. Gerald's kisses had started sweet too before they turned to possession and control, but Wade wasn't Gerald. In every way that mattered, he was Gerald's opposite. Yes, she said softly. Wade leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. It was brief, chaste even, but filled with a tenderness that made Olivia's heart ache. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. I'll come back to you, he repeated. That's a promise. Olivia nodded, unable to speak past the emotion constricting her throat. Wade touched her cheek once more, then put on his hat and walked away, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. The days without Wade stretched long for Olivia, though she was busy with teaching and gradually building relationships within the community. True to her word, Mrs. Winters checked on her regularly, often inviting her to take supper at the hotel. The sheriff tipped his hat to her whenever their paths crossed, a silent reassurance of his protection. And her students, once they realized she was both firm and fair, began to respond to her teaching with enthusiasm. But the evenings were lonely in her small house, and she found herself constantly listening for Wade's familiar footsteps on the porch, though she knew he was miles away. 2 weeks after Wade's departure, Olivia was just dismissing her class for the day when a shadow fell across the schoolhouse door. Looking up, she froze, the blood draining from her face. Gerald Davis stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light, his red beard neatly trimmed, his clothes finer than the work clothes he wore at the mine. To anyone who didn't know him, he would have appeared the very picture of a respectable gentleman. But Olivia knew the cruelty that lurked behind his pleasant facade. "Hello, Olivia," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "You've led me on quite a chase." The few remaining children in the schoolhouse sensed the tension, looking between their teacher and the stranger with wide eyes. "Children," Olivia said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will, "it's time to go home now. Directly home, please." The children gathered their things quickly, eyeing Gerald warily as they filed past him out the door. One of the older boys, Tommy Jensen, hesitated. "Are you all right, Miss Matthews?" he asked, shooting a suspicious glance at Gerald. "I'm fine, Tommy," Olivia assured him, though her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Go on home now." Once the children were gone, Gerald stepped fully into the schoolhouse, closing the door behind him with a deliberate click. "Playing schoolteacher now, are we?" he said, his tone conversational but with an undercurrent of menace that Olivia knew all too well. "How charming. And how deceitful, not to mention ungrateful, after all I've done for you." Olivia straightened her spine, determined not to show the fear coursing through her. "You've done nothing for me except hurt me, Gerald. I owe you nothing." Gerald's pleasant expression hardened. "You owe me everything, you ungrateful whore. I took you in when no one else would have you. I fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me. By running away, by stealing from me." "I stole nothing," Olivia said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Everything I took was mine, clothes I made with my own hands, food I cooked myself." Gerald took a step toward her, and Olivia instinctively backed away, bumping into her desk. "You're mine, Olivia," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You've always been mine. And you're coming back with me now." "No," Olivia said, the word coming out clear and firm despite her fear. "I'm never going back with you, Gerald. Never." Gerald's face twisted with rage, the mask of civility dropping away. "You don't have a choice," he snarled, lunging forward to grab her arm. Olivia reacted instinctively, grabbing the heavy slate board from her desk and swinging it with all her strength. It connected with Gerald's head with a sickening crack, and he staggered backward, momentarily stunned. Not waiting to see if he recovered, Olivia darted past him and ran for the door. But Gerald was quicker than she expected, recovering his balance and catching the back of her dress, yanking her backward with such force that she lost her footing and fell hard to the floor. "You'll pay for that," Gerald growled, standing over her, a trickle of blood running down his temple where the slate had struck him. Before he could reach for her again, the schoolhouse door burst open and Sheriff Holden stood there, his gun drawn. "That's far enough, Davis," the sheriff said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Step away from the lady." Gerald froze, then slowly raised his hands, his expression shifting back to one of civilized concern. "There's been a misunderstanding, Sheriff," he said smoothly. "This is my wife and she's unwell. I've come to take her home where she can receive proper care." "That's so," the sheriff replied, clearly skeptical. He looked to Olivia, who had scrambled to her feet. "Miss Matthews, is this man your husband?" "No," Olivia said firmly. "He is not, nor has he ever been. I was his housekeeper at the Blackwater mine, nothing more." "She's confused," Gerald insisted, his voice taking on a note of concern. "She's had these episodes before, poor thing. Delusions, the doctor called them." "Funny thing," the sheriff said, not lowering his weapon. "I telegraphed the authorities in Boston after Mr. Callahan told me about your situation, Miss Matthews. Seems there's no record of any marriage between you and Mr. Davis here. What there is, though, is a complaint filed by your late father about a man matching Mr. Davis's description, accusing him of fraud and misrepresentation." Gerald's facade cracked slightly, his eyes darting between the sheriff and Olivia. "Whatever she's told you is a lie," he said, his voice hardening. "She's mine and I'm taking her back. Not in my town, you're not, Sheriff Holden replied. Now you have two choices, Davis. You can leave Promise Creek peacefully and never come back, or you can spend the night in my jail and face charges of assault, given the state of Miss Matthews's face when she arrived here and what I just witnessed. Gerald's expression darkened with fury, but he was calculating enough to recognize the threat. This isn't over, he said to Olivia, his voice low with promise. You think you're safe here, you're not safe anywhere from me. That sounded an awful lot like a threat, Davis, the sheriff said, taking a step closer. Want to rethink your choice? For a tense moment, Olivia thought Gerald might actually rush the sheriff. But then the fight seemed to go out of him, and he straightened his jacket with a forced dignity. I'll go, he said coldly. For now, I'll escort you to the edge of town, the sheriff said. Make sure you're headed in the right direction, which is away from Promise Creek. He glanced at Olivia. Are you all right, Miss Matthews? Olivia nodded, though her whole body was trembling with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. Yes, thank you, Sheriff. You get on home and lock your doors, the sheriff advised. I'll make sure Davis here is well on his way before dark. After they left, Olivia gathered her things with shaking hands and hurried to her small house. Once inside, she locked the door and collapsed into a chair, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back to flow freely. Gerald had found her. Despite everything, despite the new life she was building, he had found her. And his parting words left little doubt that he would try again. That night, Olivia barely slept, starting at every sound outside her window. The sheriff had assured her that Gerald had left town, but she knew Gerald's persistence, his refusal to let go of what he considered his property. He would be back, whether in a day or a week or a month, and Wade was still away, would be for at least another week, possibly longer. The thought of facing Gerald again without Wade's steady presence beside her filled Olivia with dread. The next morning, Olivia forced herself to go to the schoolhouse as usual, determined not to let Gerald disrupt the life she was building. The children were subdued, clearly having heard about the confrontation from their parents' news traveled fast in a small town like Promise Creek. Tommy Jensen approached her desk during the lunch break, his young face serious. My pa says that man yesterday was a bad one, he said without preamble. Says he hurt you before you came here. Olivia was taken aback by the directness of the statement. Your father is right, Tommy, she said after a moment, but that's in the past now. Tommy nodded solemnly. Pa also said if that man comes back, we're supposed to run and get the sheriff or Mr. Winters from the hotel, all of us kids. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes at this evidence of the community's concern for her welfare. That's very kind of your father, she managed. It wasn't just Pa, Tommy said. All the parents agreed we're supposed to look out for each other here. That's what Pa says. The rest of the week passed without incident, but Olivia remained on edge, jumping at shadows and keeping her doors locked at all times. Sheriff Holden rode by her house each evening, tipping his hat in reassurance, and Mrs. Winters insisted she take her meals at the hotel rather than alone in her house. No sense making yourself an easy target, the older woman said bluntly. Besides, you're too thin, need some meat on those bones. The support of the townspeople was a balm to Olivia's nerves, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Gerald was out there, watching, waiting for an opportunity. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, scanning the streets whenever she walked between the schoolhouse and her home or the hotel. 10 days after Gerald's appearance, nearly a month since Wade had left, Olivia was returning to her house from the hotel after supper. The sun was setting, painting the western sky in hues of orange and pink, and the streets were quieting as people retired to their homes for the evening. As Olivia approached her small house, a sense of unease crept over her. The door was slightly ajar, though she was certain she had locked it before leaving for the day. She hesitated, fear prickling along her spine. Turning back toward the hotel seemed the wisest course, but before she could move, a figure stepped out of the shadows beside her house. Going somewhere, Olivia? Gerald's voice, cold and smooth as ice, froze her in place. The sheriff warned you to stay away, Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady as she backed away. Gerald smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. The sheriff isn't here right now, is he? In fact, I made sure of that. There's a disturbance at the saloon that required his immediate attention. Olivia glanced around desperately, but the street was empty, most people already indoors for the evening. She could run, but Gerald was faster, stronger. And he was between her and the hotel, her most likely source of help. You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Olivia, Gerald continued, moving toward her with deliberate steps. Made me look like a fool, I can't allow that. I'll scream, Olivia warned, continuing to back away. Go ahead, Gerald replied with cold confidence. By the time anyone responds, we'll be long gone. I have horses waiting just outside town. Olivia's back hit something solid, not a wall, but a person. Large hands grasped her shoulders, steadying her, and for a terrifying moment she thought Gerald had an accomplice. Then a familiar voice spoke, low and steady, from behind her. I believe the lady made it clear she doesn't want your company, Davis. Relief flooded through Olivia as Wade stepped around her, positioning himself between her and Gerald. He looked travel-worn, his clothes dusty from the trail, but his stance was alert, his blue eyes hard as he faced Gerald. Callahan, Gerald said, his mouth twisting in distaste. This doesn't concern you, this is between me and my woman. She's not your woman, Wade replied evenly. She's not your anything, and it does concern me very much. Gerald's eyes narrowed as he looked between Wade and Olivia, understanding dawning in his expression. So that's how it is, he said with a sneer. You left me for this, cowboy, this saddle tramp. I left you because you're a monster, Olivia said, her voice stronger now with Wade beside her. Because you hurt me, belittled me, made me believe I was worthless. Wade showed me otherwise. Gerald's hand moved to his belt, where Olivia now saw he wore a gun. I should kill you both, he said, his voice cold with rage. Wade's hand hovered near his own weapon, but he made no move to draw. You could try, he said calmly, but I don't think it would end well for you. For a tense moment, the three of them stood frozen in tableau, the only sound the distant piano music from the saloon and the soft evening breeze. Then Gerald's hand moved, reaching for his gun. What happened next was so fast Olivia could barely follow it. Wade drew and fired in one fluid motion, the report of the gun echoing down the quiet street. Gerald staggered backward, clutching his shoulder, his own gun falling unfired from his hand. You shot me, he gasped, looking down at the blood seeping between his fingers with disbelief. Be grateful I didn't aim for your heart, Wade replied, his gun still trained on Gerald. Though God knows you deserve worse for what you did to Olivia. Doors were opening along the street now, people drawn by the sound of gunfire. Sheriff Holden came running from the direction of the saloon, his own weapon drawn. What in blazes is going on here? He demanded, taking in the scene with a quick glance. Davis was threatening Miss Matthews, Wade explained, not lowering his gun, made a move for his weapon. I discouraged him. The sheriff looked to Olivia for confirmation, and she nodded, still shaking with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. He said he had horses waiting outside town, she added. He was planning to take me by force. The sheriff's expression hardened as he turned to Gerald, who was now pale with pain and shock. Looks like you'll be facing those assault charges after all, Davis, he said grimly. And attempted kidnapping too, I reckon. He gestured to two men who had joined them. Tom, Bill, help me get this trash to the doctor, then to the jail, and search the outskirts for those horses he mentioned. As they led Gerald away, he turned his head to look back at Olivia, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, he hissed. You'll always be mine. Always. Actually, Davis, Wade said, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air, she's her own woman. And if she chooses to be anyone else's, it'll be because she wants to be, not because some coward tried to beat her into submission. Once Gerald was out of sight, Wade turned to Olivia, his expression softening from hard determination to concern. Are you all right? He asked, holstering his gun and gently taking her hands in his. Olivia nodded, though she was still trembling. You're back early, she said, the words inadequate for the relief and gratitude she felt. Wade's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Something told me I needed to be here, he said. Pushed hard the last few days to get back sooner, his expression sobered. I'm glad I did. The realization that she had come so close to being taken by Gerald, that if Wade hadn't returned early, she might now be bound for some remote location where no one would find her, hit Olivia like a physical blow. Her knees buckled and Wade caught her, drawing her against his chest. It's all right, he murmured, one hand stroking her hair. It's over now, he can't hurt you anymore. Olivia allowed herself to lean into his strength, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and horses and the clean mountain air. You saved me, she whispered. Wade shook his head. You saved yourself long before I came along, Olivia. You had the courage to run, to start over. I just helped a little at the end. Mrs. Winters appeared then, bustling through the small crowd that had gathered. For heaven's sake, don't just stand there in the street, she scolded. Bring her inside where she can sit down properly. Wade kept an arm around Olivia's waist as they followed Mrs. Winters into the hotel and through to the small private parlor behind the reception desk. Once inside, the older woman poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handing one to Olivia without ceremony. Drink it, she instructed. Doctor's orders, and I nursed with the army during the war, so I outrank any doctor in these parts. Olivia obediently took a sip, coughing as the liquor burned its way down her throat. But the warmth that followed was not unwelcome, and some of the shaking in her limbs began to subside. Mrs. Winters looked between Olivia and Wade, her expression softening. Well, I've got a hotel to run, she said briskly. You two take your time, and Wade Callahan, I expect you to see Miss Matthews safely home when you're done here. After she left, closing the door firmly behind her, Wade sat beside Olivia on the small settee, his thigh warm against hers. I meant to come straight to you when I got back, he said, looking down at his hands. But I stopped at the livery first to see to my horse, and Tom Jensen told me what happened with Davis last week. His jaw tightened. I should have been here. You're here now, Olivia said softly. That's what matters. Wade looked up, meeting her eyes. When Tom told me Davis had been in town, had threatened you, I've never been so scared in my life, Olivia. The thought of him hurting you again, of losing you before I even had the chance to. He trailed off, but his eyes, those intense blue eyes that had captured her attention from the first moment she saw him, said everything his words didn't. Before you had the chance to what, Wade? Olivia asked, her heart beating faster. Wade took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. Before I had the chance to tell you that I love you, he said simply. That I think I've loved you since I found you at the edge of my campfire, standing so brave despite everything you'd been through. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Love, such a small word for such an enormous feeling. Gerald had claimed to love her once, but his version of love had been possession, control, cruelty. What she felt from Wade had felt from the beginning was something entirely different, something that built her up rather than tore her down. Something that recognized her strength rather than sought to break it. I know it's too soon, Wade continued when she didn't immediately respond. After what you've been through, the last thing you need is another man making claims on you. I don't expect anything, Olivia. I just wanted you to know. It's not too soon, Olivia said, finding her voice at last. Not when it's real. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. I love you too, Wade. I think part of me has from the beginning, though I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. The smile that broke across Wade's face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds, transforming his features with joy. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her a kiss deeper than their first, but still achingly gentle, still respecting her boundaries. When they broke apart, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I want to court you properly, Olivia Matthews, he said. No rushing, no pressure. I want to do right by you in every way. I would like that, Olivia replied, her heart fuller than she had thought possible. True to his word, Wade courted Olivia with patience and respect over the following months. He escorted her to church on Sundays, to community gatherings and socials. He took her on picnics in the nearby meadows when the weather permitted, and brought her books from his own small collection to read on cold evenings. Gerald Davis was sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison for assault and attempted kidnapping, a fact that brought Olivia both relief and a lingering sadness for the man he might have been, had cruelty not consumed him. As winter gave way to spring, Olivia flourished in her role as teacher. The children adored her, and the parents respected her dedication to their education. She began offering evening classes for adults who wished to improve their reading or arithmetic, and found joy in watching miners and farmwives alike discover the pleasure of reading or the satisfaction of balancing their own accounts. Wade continued working for the Rocking R, but increasingly spoke of his dream to have his own small ranch. "Nothing fancy," he would say as they sat together on the porch of Olivia's little house in the evenings. "Just enough land for a decent herd, a garden, maybe some apple trees. A place to build a life." On a warm evening in late May, nearly 7 months after Olivia had stumbled into Wade's camp, he took her riding to a small plateau overlooking Promise Creek. The valley spread out below them, green with spring growth, the town a collection of neat buildings along the main street. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, breathing in the clean mountain air, feeling more at peace than she had ever thought possible. "It is," Wade agreed, but when she turned to look at him, he was watching her, not the view. "You're beautiful, Olivia, inside and out." He dismounted and helped her down from her horse, but instead of releasing her once her feet touched the ground, he kept hold of her hands. "I brought you here for a reason," he said, his voice serious but warm. "This land, this plateau, and the valley beyond, stretching to that stand of pines, it's mine now. I signed the final papers yesterday." Olivia looked around with new eyes, seeing not just the beauty of the landscape, but its potential, the rich grass for grazing, the stream running clear and cold along the edge of the property, the sheltered spot near the pines that would be perfect for a house. "Your own ranch," she said, squeezing his hands. "Your dream." "Half my dream," Wade corrected. He released her hands, but only to reach into his pocket and pull out a small box. Olivia's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "The other half of my dream is you, Olivia," Wade said, his voice steady despite the nervousness in his eyes. "These past months, loving you, watching you heal and grow strong, have been the happiest of my life. I want to spend the rest of my days with you if you'll have me." He sank to one knee, holding the ring up to her. "Olivia Matthews, will you marry me? Not because you're mine or I'm yours, but because we choose each other freely and equally every day for the rest of our lives." Tears filled Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Wade Callahan, I will marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Wade gestured toward the stand of pines. "I thought we could build the house there," he said, his eyes alight with plans and dreams, with a wide porch facing this view. The barn and corrals on the south side protected from the winter winds. "And a garden," Olivia added, catching his enthusiasm, "with vegetables and flowers, maybe fruit trees someday, and children," Wade said softly, watching her face carefully for her reaction. "If you want them." Olivia's heart swelled at the thought, children with Wade's blue eyes and her determination, growing up loved and secure in a home built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "I do want them," she said, "very much." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Promise Creek, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Mrs. Winters cried openly during the ceremony, and even Sheriff Holden was seen to wipe a suspicious moisture from his eye when Wade and Olivia exchanged their vows. "I take you not as my possession, but as my partner," Wade said, his voice carrying clearly through the church. "I promise to honor your strength, to support your dreams, to love you freely and fully all the days of my life." "I take you not out of need or fear, but out of choice and love," Olivia responded, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I promise to stand beside you as your equal, to build a life of joy and purpose with you, to love you freely and fully all the days of my life." The years that followed were not without challenges: the harsh Wyoming winters, the difficulties of building a ranch from nothing, the economic uncertainties that affected all who made their living from the land. But they faced each challenge together, drawing strength from each other and from the deep bond between them. Olivia continued to teach until their first child was born, a daughter they named Sarah after Wade's mother. 2 years later came James, named for Olivia's father, and 3 years after that, Emma, a surprise blessing when they thought their family complete. As the children grew, so did the ranch, which they named Promise Valley in honor of the town that had given them both a second chance. Wade's careful management and Olivia's good sense with finances saw them through the lean years. And by the time Sarah was 10, the ranch was one of the most prosperous in the territory. Olivia never forgot the darkness she had escaped, and she made it her mission to help other women who found themselves in similar situations. The small cabin she and Wade built behind the main house became a refuge for women fleeing abuse, a place where they could heal and plan their next steps, just as Olivia had done in Promise Creek years before. Wade supported her fully in this work, often riding out to escort women to safety or confronting abusive husbands or fathers alongside Sheriff Holden. Together, they became known throughout the territory as champions for those who could not defend themselves. Gerald Davis was released from prison after serving his full sentence, but he never returned to Promise Creek. Years later, they heard he had died in a mining accident in Montana, bitter and alone to the end. Olivia said a prayer for his soul, then turned back to the life and love she had built from the ashes of her pain. On their 20th anniversary, Wade took Olivia back to the plateau where he had proposed. The ranch sprawled below them now, the main house with its wide porch, the barn and corrals, the bunkhouse for the hands they employed, the garden lush with summer growth, the orchard beginning to bear fruit. Did you ever imagine this? Wade asked as they sat together on a blanket, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. That day when you were running from Blackwater Mine, did you ever think life could be this good? Olivia leaned against his shoulder, her hand finding his with the ease of long familiarity. Never, she admitted. I was just trying to survive. I didn't dare dream of happiness. Wade brought her hand to his lips, kissing the wedding band that had never left her finger in all these years. And now? Olivia smiled, looking out over the home they had built together, not just the buildings and the land, but the life, the family, the love that sustained them through good times and bad. Now, she said, turning to meet the blue eyes that still looked at her with the same love they had shown that first night by the campfire. Now I know that I'm not just surviving, I'm living, fully and freely and loved. She kissed him softly. And I am yours, Wade Callahan, just as you are mine, not because either of us demands it, but because we choose it every single day. Wade's arms wrapped around her, holding her close against the gathering evening chill. Every single day, he agreed, for all the days we have left. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Olivia knew with bone-deep certainty that this love, this man, this life they had created together, was worth every step of the difficult journey that had brought her here. From worthless to cherished, from possession to partner, from fear to love, it was a transformation she had never dared to hope for, but one she would be grateful for until her last breath.